All right, here we go. Thanks for coming to my presentation. I'm Jay Blakesberg, probably know that, and this is my story. So I grew up in suburban New Jersey in the 1970s, and while we were growing up, we had all sorts of hopes and dreams, like all of us when we were teenagers. And we hoped we could survive teenage wasteland. That was like the biggest thing, like we just had no idea. But those dreams, they were elusive and they were unclear, right? Remember what it was like being a teenager? You guys probably have kids that are like still have elusive dreams and don't know what's going on. But we saw something in those dreams that moved us towards the spark. And that's what this story is about. It's the spark that we all get to touch, right? Like we come to the IGE immersion, you know, in Lisbon or Barcelona or Prague next year, right? Because there's that spark that we want to touch that, you know, makes these experiences for us that are unique and special. And once it touched us, there was no way to escape the zeitgeist that was just around the corner, right? And you got to remember, you know, and a lot of you are about my same age. I'm going to be 58 years old shortly. And, you know, in the 1970s, it was so different than it is today, right? You know, clearly just with, you know, technology and information and everything. And so, you know, but the other thing that was also interesting is in terms of like music, there was the Grateful Dead and the Allman Brothers, like in terms of our world that we inhabit, like all these other bands that we all love and adore, many of which are here and members of, you know, just were really, you know, just a little seed that had not sprouted yet. Crazy was the feeling, restlessness was in our bones, right? We all wanted to get out. We all wanted to travel. We all wanted an adventure, right? And if you wanted an adventure, there was an adventure to be had. And we dreamed that somehow, somewhere in our life, we'd get to touch magic, right? And because that's ultimately what we're looking for in the things that we do, and the music we listen to, the music we play, the art we absorb, everything is that we're always trying to touch that magic just a little bit, because that's what keeps us going, that's what inspires us, right? And that's what this story really is about. That's me in Glens Falls, New York in the summer of '79, at a Grateful Dead concert, hanging out by the river, jumping off a piece of rope on a tree into the water. So as Mr. Phil Lesh so he says, buckle up kids, because here we go. So this is me and my buddies in high school in New Jersey in the 1970s. We drank beer, we hung out. This is my bedroom. This is like a pretty typical, like every night of the week kind of a thing. Like my house was definitely the vortex for gambling and alcohol and marijuana. All the things that, like, you know, when we did those things when we were that age, like our parents actually wanted to commit us to like insane asylums or maybe send us to drug rehab because God forbid we were smoking marijuana. Like, I mean, just, you know, like, oh my God, right? And so, you know, basically all of us live this life of adolescent stupidity, right? I mean, I know myself, like, I'm lucky to be alive. Like, the dumb shit that we did, like, on a regular basis, like, we're probably all pretty lucky to actually be alive because we were all really fucking stupid. In 1977, I saw my first Grateful Dead concert and the transformation began. Who was in Englishtown? Yes. September 3rd, 77. All right, we got a couple of brothers over here. Legendary concert. You know, 105 degrees, 100,000 plus people. It was, you know, it was an epic show. It's a Dick's Picks, maybe number 15 or something like that. If you haven't heard it, starting this week, there's going to be, I'm a guest DJ on Sirius XM Grateful Dead channel starting this Monday, I believe it is. And my little guest DJing thing ends with the He's Gone, Not Fade Away from this show. And I said to them, I said, can I play these two songs? It's 40 minutes long. They're like, yeah, I'll just end with it. I'll just roll on out. But it's like truly epic 77. Grateful Dead. And this is the only known photo of me at Englishtown. You know, getting ready, brought my little portable bong. Like, can you even imagine like bringing a bong into a concert now, like through the gate with your ticket? Like, even like a little bong like that. Like, I mean, like really, you know? Right, in a clear backpack. Oh my God, right? Are you even allowed to bring a Bic lighter into a show now? And so in the spring of 1978, May of 1978, I went and saw this guy, Jorma Kaukonen, we all know who Jorma is, at the Capitol Theater in Passaic, New Jersey. And I went with this guy here, his name was Lazi, and we went in this car, this Carmen Gia, and it was like a 40-minute drive up to Passaic, New Jersey at the Capitol Theater. And after the show was over, Lazi says, let's hang out at the side door and get Jorma's autograph when he comes out. Well, Jorma came out and he just got right in his limousine and, got ready to take off. And Lazi's like, okay, let's go follow his limousine wherever they go. And let's get an autograph. So we jump into Carmen Gia, the fucking Batmobile, right? These things have no seats in the back. There's 4 of us. Me and my buddy Nicky, who are like 4 feet tall in 10th grade, And we follow Jorma's limousine into New York City, and he gets out in a delicatessen in Midtown Manhattan, presumably to get some food, and we go in, and I say, hey Jorma, how about a smile? And this is the photo that he gave me, right? No, but the thing about this particular photograph is this is why back then, if you were backstage at a Hot Tuna show or a Jorma show, you did not drink anything anybody handed you that was already open. And they actually would say that. They would tell you, do not drink anything that's already open because this is what you will look like. So anyway, so I'm 16 years old and I took this photograph and I wrote a little story about how we followed Jorma into the city and I mailed it to Relics magazine. Everybody still read Relics magazine, right? And they published it. And this is the first photo of mine that was ever published in print. And I was 16 years old. And now, nowadays, like we're published like every 30 seconds, every 12 seconds on everything. But back then, to be published in a magazine that you read cover to cover when it came out, every issue, was a pretty mind-blowing experience. I mean, it really was just one of those things like, oh my God, like there's my photograph in print, in a magazine that other people are reading. It was pretty huge for me. In September of 1978, the Grateful Dead played the first of their 4 big Labor Day weekend concerts. And the first one was in Englishtown the year before. The next year in September 78 was number 2 of the 4 Labor Day concerts. And this was the first time I photographed the Grateful Dead. My dad loaned me his Pentax camera and I brought it to the Meadowlands and the stage is like 20 feet high. And there's these giant monitors on stage, and I mean, even being like kind of really far back, thank you. Even being like, 30, 40, 50 feet back, you still can't even see below their waist because the stage was just so high. But I got a couple of decent photographs and I sent my film out to the local lab to get it developed because I still was not quite doing a lot of darkroom yet, but I did make the prints in my darkroom in the basement of my mother's house. And right after they played Giant Stadium, they went to Egypt, right? So they played Giant Stadium, 35,000 people, in Egypt for 35 deadheads and 35 camels. And then they did their big fall tour on the East Coast. And one of the shows was at the Capitol Theater in Passaic, New Jersey, where I saw that Jorma show. And in order to get tickets for that show, you had to mail in a letter to like a Deadheads only address at the Capitol Theater. And this room held only like 2,000 people, so it was a pretty small venue. Most of the other venues that were playing on this tour were arenas. And if you got your ticket in the mail, and it was a floor ticket in the orchestra, you got this gold foil ticket. The balcony was a silver foil ticket. And I like to say that this is my Willy Wonka golden ticket, right? But also the great thing about this is like, look at the price of that ticket. It's like the same thing as like, Dead & Co. at Playing in the Sand, same amount of money these days, right?
The decimal point.
Right, yeah, exactly. And this particular show with the band, Garcia was really, really sick with the flu. And you can watch this, it's on YouTube. And it was a live broadcast on WNEW in New York. And Garcia could barely sing, but he played really, really well. And the next night when they got to Hartford, Connecticut, to the arena, everybody went to the show, everybody got inside, everybody dosed, and then Weir came out and said, Jerry's really sick and we're canceling the show. And that was the next night after this show. And it was one of those rare occurrences that happened. But these were some of my first photos that I really, took of the band that actually came out pretty good. At this point, I believe that I had my own camera. My birthday was the next week after this, and my dad had bought me my Yashica camera. So I was, now I'm not using my dad's camera, but I was using my camera for these. And I was just taking these photos and making prints in my darkroom, my mother's house, and hanging them on my bedroom wall. You can see the shot of Jorma up there above my head that's signed. And I always look at this photo and I'm like, what did my mother think about the Dubon hits Like, what does that mean? Like, who the fuck, you know? But that's, you know, some of my other photos of Jorma over there and the new riders, just, you know, this is just stuff like out of albums that we would just like, you know, thumbtack to the wall. In May of '79, the Grateful Dead got a new keyboard player, Brent Midland, and he played one show in California, one show in North Carolina, and then this was the third show in Hampton, Virginia. I convinced my mother to let me drive down to Virginia with this guy that was dating my sister in his van, and as we were leaving the show in Hampton, he totaled his van in the parking lot. He rear-ended somebody, which is actually a good thing, because if we actually got on the freeway, I'd probably be dead and wouldn't be here at the immersion right now, dreaming about Prague next year. And so, you know, we just rolled the van into a parking spot and stuck out our thumbs, and it was like pretty easy to get a ride to Baltimore, where the Grateful Dead were playing the next night, you know, and everybody there was going practically. So we just hitchhiked, we got a ride, crashed on some hotel room floor, and then the next day there was a giant No Nukes rally in Washington, D.C., and the people we were hitching with, who actually lived in Long Island, and we were sort of along for the ride at that point, were going to anyway. And so you guys all remember the big No Nukes rallies in the late 1970s. And so we get there, and there's all these people speaking, like, you know, Jane Fonda is up on stage, and she's speaking, and that's Tom Hayden, her husband, then next to her. And then I'm walking around, and I find a press pass on the ground, right? So, like, you know, all of a sudden I'm like on stage with Jane Fonda. And you know, Joni Mitchell played, and Jackson Browne played, and Graham Nash played, you know, and then Joni and Graham and Jackson all played together. And then I turned around, and Bob Weir and Brent Midland were standing there, right? And so I'm 17 years old at this point, and now I'm having my first one-to-one interaction with a member of the Grateful Dead. And so, and at this point, like I said, Brent had only played 4 shows with the Grateful Dead, so nobody knew who Brent was. You know, back then, like when that show was happening, everybody in the audience like, who's the new keyboard player that looks like Greg Allman, right? Like nobody knew his name, nobody knew anything. Like information was like, you know, Pony Express, right? There was like nothing. And so everybody was talking to Bob, and of course Bob was looking pretty fucking badass in his 70s glasses, right? And then I took this photo of Brent, and I sent this to Relics magazine, and they published it like 6 months later. And that was like one of the first times that Deadheads actually got to see a photo of Brent Midland, the new keyboard player in the Grateful Dead. And then 4 weeks later, I graduated from high school. And yes, that's a little Skull and Roses patch on my gown that I sewed on myself. I had good hippie skills. I knew how to sew. And so then when summer rolled around, we did what every good person looking for an adventure did. We jumped in my '69 Chevy Nova, and we drove to Red Rocks to see the Grateful Dead. And so we got out to Red Rocks, and the first night that they played, I did not get into the show. I didn't have a ticket. I had a ticket for the next 2 nights. And it was the only Grateful Dead concert I never got into. And then it started raining, and this is before Red Rocks had a roof. So they moved the shows indoors to McNichols Arena, which doesn't exist anymore. It's like whatever, some old arena that's been knocked down. And that's where this shot is from. And so while I was out on tour and seeing a bunch of shows that summer, I met this guy named Jay Johnson, and he said, hey, I'm gonna be writing a review of either the end of the summer, the 3rd Labor Day weekend concert in a row, Rochester, New York, September 1st, 1979, which is where the shot of Jerry is from. And I'm going to be writing a review of either the Rochester show or the Madison Square Garden show the next week. Do you want to shoot the photos for it? And I said, sure. And so I shot the Rochester show, and I submitted my photos, and they published them in the Aquarian Weekly. Anybody live in Jersey? The Aquarian is like a free weekly newspaper like in everywhere else in the country, you know, Village Voice, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is the first time that I was published in a newspaper, and I got paid for these 2 photographs. I was given $7.50 for each of them, for a total of $15. But I was 17 years old, and I was like, you know, yeah, I was like on my way. I was so excited to get $15. Like, you know? And the funny thing is, they reviewed the garden show, but used the outdoor shots from the week before in Rochester. I probably couldn't meet their deadline. And then, of course, just last year, I had the cover of the Aquarium Weekly with Chris Robinson's brother. That's sad with Neil up there. But so 30 years or so after I shot my first assignment, my first and only assignment for the Aquarium Weekly, I got a cover with them. And then this is from the Garden that next week, Madison Square Garden in September of '79. For my 18th birthday, I went and saw the Grateful Dead in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at the Stanley Theater. Anybody know the Stanley? Little, tiny, small theater, holds about 2,000 people. You had to mail in a postal money order to the hardware store on the corner next to the theater. That was also a record store. And then you got your theater tickets in the mail. And so we drove out the 8 hours from Jersey. And this was November 30th and December 1st, 1979. And December 1st was my 18th birthday, so I got to see the Grateful Dead on my 18th birthday. A few weeks later, I jumped in a Greyhound bus and went across country to see my first New Year's Grateful Dead concerts. I don't know why I took a bus and didn't fly. I don't know if I knew airplanes existed or didn't have the money or didn't know what was going on. But anyway, this is me in the Salt Lake City bus station. And so we got to California, and of course the Grateful Dead played 5 nights there. And so my plan was pretty simple. I was going to take pictures 3 of the nights, the 26th, the 28th, and the 31st. And on the 27th and on the 30th, I would drop acid. Pretty clean, trajectory there. And again, I'm just a kid with a camera. There's no photo pit. Actually, at this point, there is no photo pit at all. I have no pass. And you didn't have to wait online for like 9 hours to get a shot on the rail back then. Like, we'd get online, an hour before doors, and you just walk in and walk right up to the front. There was nobody running to the rail, and it wasn't a thing, and it wasn't like, rock star Richard beating people up and, all this other shit that happens today. But anyway, these are some of the first, some of my really fun first photos of the Grateful Dead. The 26th, this one's from the 28th. Bobby being a rock star, right? And then, of course, on New Year's Eve, you're from New Jersey, and you had heard, last year at the closing of Winterland, Bill Graham came down, what was it, the giant joint or the motorcycle, right? So you were waiting, what is Bill Graham gonna do? And Bill Graham, of course, comes flying down as a giant butterfly, and you're just like, what the fuck? I'm from New Jersey, this doesn't happen there. This is California, I'm gonna live there someday. And then the balloons are falling, and Steve Parrish is popping them all with his pocket knife, and it's it was just it was just so different and just so raw and real and original and first generation. This was just the beginning. There was no fish, there was no string cheese, there was no fruition. There was just the fucking Grateful Dead. And then of course a few months later, the Grateful Dead were back at the Capitol Theater, and again you had to mail in for your special tickets. If you were in the orchestra now, you got a silver foil ticket. Inflation had hit. The tickets were now $2.50 more. That's a pretty big increase, right? And of course, this is the show where John Belushi comes jumping out on the side of the stage and does a cartwheel and grabs the microphone and starts singing U.S. Blues with these guys. Wow. And then it was at that show that I met this guy. This guy's name was BT, Brother Tom. And BT comes up to me. We're all back on the soundboard and we're all dancing. And BT comes up to me and says, "Hey man, you want a dose?" And I'm like, "Sure." So he whips out a sheet of acid and rips it in half, and it's not perforated. It's got a bunch of little triangles silk screened on it. And I'm like, "Well, what's one hit?" He goes, "Well, each little triangle." Well, he gave me 50 hits of acid. So I just start tearing them up and handing them to my friends. And then he says to me, "Hey, if you want, when I get back to San Francisco next week, I'd be happy to FedEx you a couple thousand hits of LSD that you can sell to your friends in high school, and you can become part of my underground LSD distribution network." And I thought that was the greatest idea ever. So I gave him my address and my phone number, and he started FedExing me thousands of hits of LSD. And it was it was the gig economy, right? You'd get 1,000, you take a sheet of acid, you get it for $50, you'd sell it to your friends for $100, and they would sell it for $3 a hit. And eventually, BT stopped making the triangle pyramid acid and started making the red ganjas, and this was his brand, which is, I don't know where he got the name Red Ganja, but that's what that was. And a couple of years later, unbeknownst to Phil Lesh was wearing a rainbow ganja t-shirt at a show in Oregon. So, we were going to a ton of shows, everywhere we could possibly go, and I was making 8x10 black and white glossy photos with circles and arrows and a paragraph on the back of each one, and selling them in the parking lot for, $1 or $2 a piece. And this is me in the parking lot. But really, this was just like the cover to tell my parents, like, well, how are you going to all these Grateful Dead concerts? Well, Mom and Dad, I'm just selling 8x10 black and white glossies in the parking lot. And so we're running around the country and we're seeing the Grateful Dead from Maine to Florida, San Diego to Alaska, and everywhere in between. And so this is the summer of 1980 at this point. Right? And we're just traveling everywhere, and we're flying on airplanes, and we're like living the high life. Like we're selling copious quantities of LSD like across to everybody. Life was grand. We had piles of cash. And so I got in a car with these people, and I drove across country, went to the Grand Canyon, and we dropped acid, and then of course the tour started in Compton Terrace, and this is June 5th, 1980. And my wife was actually at this show, but we didn't know each other at the time. But she was a Tempe, Arizona girl, or Tucson, Arizona girl. And then, of course, that was the tour also where they played Boulder. This is Boulder, Folsom Field, the old Folsom Field before they knocked it down. And this show right here is actually the official 15th anniversary concert for the Grateful Dead. That's how these shows were built, the 15th anniversary of the Grateful Dead. I mean, think about that for a minute, like where we are now, like pretty close to 55 years, right? So, just blows my mind. And we kept cruising through the Rocky Mountains. That's Ed Donahue. I don't know if you guys remember Ed, the great t-shirt artist. And so we, from Boulder, we drove up through the mountains and went to Portland, Seattle, Spokane. And that was where the Mount St. Helens erupted in Portland while they were playing Fire on the Mountain. This is a known fact. Known fact. GPS records, time stamped and everything. Wow. And then, of course, we went up to Alaska. And this is up in Alaska, and this is where they played in the high school auditorium at West High. There were no Wookiees out there looking for a miracle ticket, right? I mean, this room held like 600 or 800 people or something like that. And this is actually set break because it's summer solstice in June of 1980, and so it's basically light all the time. And so during set break, they just let us all go outside and hang out because there were no Eskimos trying to sneak in. And these are some of the shots from Alaska in 80. Jerry wearing this black button-down shirt, a little confusing. And then I hitchhiked down to the Bay Area. Actually, flew back to Seattle, and I hitchhiked down to the Bay Area and hung out in San Francisco, living on Masonic at Haight for a little bit, before we drove down to LA and San Diego, where they played two shows, the Pauley Pavilion in San Diego. And the San Diego show is kind of a legendary show. It's where Bob Weir got arrested, Mickey Hart got arrested. There was like a whole thing you can read about it everywhere on the internet. In between the two shows, we went to Disneyland, because that's what you do when you're a deadhead and you're with 10 people and you have a lot of acid in your pocket, and we all dropped acid and like Pirates of the Caribbean on LSD, like holy fucking shit, and they told like us that we couldn't wear like red bandanas on our head because it was like a gang symbol, like we got in trouble. But this is actually all of us like sitting there after Pirates of the Caribbean, just like pondering that moment. Like literally, we're just like whoa, dude, like fucking whoa. And so while we were at the show in Los Angeles, we met this young lady whose name was Stephanie, and we had another person in our crew whose name was also Stephanie, and the other Stephanie was bigger and taller and heavier, and so she became Little Steph. And so Little Steph was from New Jersey, flew to San Jose to visit a friend from high school who had just moved to San Jose. They convinced that girl's mother to let them drive or take a Greyhound bus down to LA for these two Dead shows. So we bring Stephanie and her friend with us to Disneyland, and we bring them to San Diego. And then we had borrowed my girlfriend at the time's father's car. It was like a big, giant, like 70s Oldsmobile. He was a colonel in the army. And we drove down, and then we drove back up, and we took little Steph. And that's my girlfriend Tammy at the time, to her friend's house in San Jose, where she packed her bag. We drove her up to the Haight-Ashbury, and little Steph called her mom Joyce back in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and she said, "Mom, I met some hippies. I'm not coming back to New Jersey, and I'm not going back to high school. I hope you can understand." Right? Like, isn't that like the phone call that all of us want from our daughter? I met some Hare Krishnas, moving to India. So little Steph joined our traveling circus at 16 years old, and she hung out. This is a New Year's show. This is us like getting down and dirty, like at the Bill Graham Civic, or maybe it was Henry J. Kaiser. I think Kaiser. You know, New Year's Eve, midnight, out in the hallway, speakers in the hallway. Again, like, you know, I mean, this was just like such a moment that was just, you know, never to be repeated. I mean, you know, first of all, there are no fucking cell phones, right? Like that's like when you look at these pictures, you know, that are now 30 and 40 years old. I mean, this photo is almost 40 years old. You know, that is like the beauty of all of this, and that's why this kind of thing will never happen again. And so then the summer tour started in Edwardsville, Illinois, and this was a show that was billed as the Mississippi River Festival. It started raining really, really hard. And everybody's tape decks were filling it with water, and then a lightning struck the sound system. And I actually listened to this on the archive like about 2 weeks ago because I always tell the story that the sound system blew up. It blew up. Like you can go listen to it. Like during Deal, like the whole thing like fell apart because the sound system hit it. But it's this giant rainstorm. And then of course this is BT again, Brother Tom, the acid guru, and my friend Borden Barrows. Borden was also another big LSD dealer who got arrested in a hotel room in Rochester with 10,000 hits of LSD. And so, everybody remember the Mayflower Madam? Remember that? She was this like high-end prostitute in New York City, like in the 80s. That was Borden's sister.
Wow.
Yeah. And then of course, you know, we ended up at the, you know, from there we went to the Uptown Theater in Chicago with 3 incredible shows. So at this point, you know, Brent is like firing on all cylinders. Like these shows were incredible. The summer of 1980, if you go back and listen to this music, you know, they broke out all this great music, The Wheel and just, you know, China Doll, and so much stuff was coming out because Brent was just learning stuff and they were inspired and the drugs were good. And, you know, and then of course, you know, this is a pretty typical scene. You guys remember sleeping on hotel room floors like this? Right. And the thing is, it's like this carpeting in this hotel is so disgusting. I don't know what happened to the drawer. But this carpet, like I don't think I'd walk on this carpeting in flip-flops today. I'd sleep on this floor. Like, I mean, like really fucking gross, right? Anyway, so the summer tour ended in September 6th. The 4th Labor Day weekend show in a row that the Grateful Dead did. It was the band, Roy Buchanan, and the Grateful Dead. And whenever I post this as an anniversary shot on social media, people always comment about how this is really one of the most epic Grateful Dead shows. And so it's never been released as a Dick's Picks. I'm guessing there's like no soundboard of it. The band doesn't have it, but there's some great audience tapes of it. But this was like this glorious day out in this field at the end of the summer in Lewiston, Maine. And it was just like this incredible end of this, you know, I mean, me and all my friends, we called this our summer of love because it truly was this magical, incredible adventure that we were all on. And then, and this was taken at that show, and this is again my girlfriend Tammy at the time. And Tammy was 17 and I was 18 when this was all going down. And a couple of years ago, the Rolling Stone magazine put out a special issue on the Grateful Dead, and they used this photo as the lead photo on the table of contents page. And they called me up and they're like, hey Jay, do you have any the caption info for this photo? I'm like, yeah. Her name is Tammy Ballinger. She was 17. I was 18. Her father was a colonel in the Army. She lived in Monterey. I kidnapped her. We went on tour. She would write postcards home to her father saying how she was expanding her consciousness with these new friends that she had met. And it was taken on September 6, 1980 in Lewiston, Maine. They're like, too much information. So, and then of course, right after that, I went back to school. I pretended to be in college, and I was in Middlesex Community College. They had a great photography program. But while I was doing that, I really was pretending to be in college and running back and forth to San Francisco because this was the beginning of the big run where they were doing 15 nights at the Warfield, and the whole Warfield was decked out as a museum, and they had the big bill wings. And you know, they played 15 nights at the Warfield, then 2 nights in New Orleans at the Sanger, and then 8 nights at Radio City Music Hall. And so that was where they did an acoustic set, you know, followed by 2 electric sets. There's live records, and you know, one of my fave shots of Jerry. Just really love this picture of him. I mean, this is the epitome of Garcia, right? Like, I mean, at the peak moment, right? This is it right here. So we went down to New Orleans. Anybody been to the Sanger Theater Jazz Fest in recent years? So you know how they have those glass doors like this that have a little crack in the middle? So we're all up in the balcony, and we're all dancing. And they send security after us, and they actually kick us out of the venue, like 8 or 10 of us, for dancing. It's like Footloose, right? You guys remember the movie Footloose? Like, no dancing. Like, if you dance, you might have sex, right? And so we're like, wow, really? That's all it takes? And so So our friends, so we get kicked out for dancing. So our friends scoop up all the ticket stubs off the floor and they slide them through the glass doors, the double doors on the side, because the Sanger has entrances on the front and the side. And we go to the drugstore on the corner and we buy some Scotch tape and we tape them back together and perforate them with a little safety pin, and we all walk back into the show because we're resourceful like the old deadheads, you know. And you know, like this is like a show day. Like this is 1980. This is how many people were on tour. Like there was nobody around. There was no fucking Shakedown Street. Like that fucking shit didn't exist yet. Like this was like, you know, 40 or 50 people like going from show to show. And you know, and people came and people out, but there was not like anything like it became. And then of course it ended with 8 nights at Radio City Music Hall. And I was such a stupid deadhead. The 9th night, the next night was the Remain in Light tour with the Talking Heads at that time. But I didn't discover the Talking Heads for one more year. But that was like the most epic record, you know. I mean, you guys all know the Remain in Light record. It's just incredible. But anyway, this was all of us dancing out in the hallway at Radio City Music Hall. This is actually in the lobby, speakers in the lobby. I mean, this is like what the scene was like. It was just this very, you know, different. This is New Year's, right after that in 1980 at the Henry J. Kaiser. Again, this is the park on a show day, right across the street from the venue. And this is how many people were camping. Like there was not like villages. You know, there was like, you know, 10 or 15 people that were in tents in the park. And of course, you know, me and my friends, that's me down there, you know, we got to go visit 710 Ashbury because it's like being in Lisbon. Like if 710 Ashbury was in Lisbon, we'd all go, right? You know, you go to San Francisco, you go. And of course, you know, we're grooving in the hallways and, you know, the band is dropping balloons at midnight and Bill's coming out on his giant skull and, you know. And at this point, you know, like I had pretty much transformed completely from this like innocent kid in New Jersey in his bedroom to like a full-blown psychedelic hippie. The Grateful Dead will do that to you, right? You know, like, I mean, like, look at my part and my pants, my corduroys, and now I'm like wearing purple velvet genie pants. So, but anyway, of course, you know, it's things like that where all good things must come to an end, and I went down to FedEx and picked up a package that was sent to me by Brother Tom in San Francisco. And yes, that's me, the alleged drug dealer. So I got arrested picking up 2,000 hits of LSD at the FedEx station in Edison, New Jersey, and got thrown in jail. And I stayed in the little local lockup for a few days while my parents had a meltdown and tried to figure out like what they were going to do and if they were going to bail me out and how they were going to do that. And but I always like to say that, you know, we are the sum of our experiences. This is a picture I took at the Gay Day Parade in San Francisco a number of years ago. You know, and you know, everything that we do, like coming to the immersion in Lisbon or Prague next year, like everything we do are those experiences that make us who we are. Like we connect with like-minded people, we're around people that we like and like the same music, and so, you know, we could all just be like at home watching the new season of Peaky Blinders on Netflix, right? Or we could be here in Lisbon, like having this incredible experience, right? And so that's what we choose to do. Like we choose to have fun. Like Marco Benevento, you know, his t-shirt always says, using my time for fun. Like that's what we're doing. And when we use our time for fun, we have these incredible experiences which makes us richer people. So that's why I always like to say, we are the sum of our experiences, and to go out and have those experiences because it makes us more interesting people. Right? And so while I was awaiting the wheels of justice to slowly spin, I moved out to the West Coast to get residency in the state of Washington so I could go back to college after this ordeal with the law kind of came to an end. And of course, the Grateful Dead played at the Greek Theater in Berkeley, so I had to go. So I was living in Washington State, in Olympia, Washington, and we drove down to Berkeley and saw some shows at the Greek. And this is our friend Rusty. And Rusty was on tour with us back in 1980, probably all the way up until the late 80s. And the thing that I love about this particular photo is this is set break. So that's what Rusty was like, right, Lauren? Like this was Rusty like all the time, right? You know, like, he was just floating. Like this is what happens if you take LSD every single day of your life for like 10 years. Like this is what happens. So, you know, just a warning, every other night. And then back in October of '82, I went down to the Frost Amphitheater, and this was the first time the Grateful Dead played at the Frost. And this is where they broke out, I think, Touch of Grey and Throwing Stones for the first time live. A couple legendary shows, and love this photo. Actually, just discovered this photo a few months ago in my archive. Had never really noticed it before, and I'm like, wow, that's a cool shot of Jer. Phil playing that weird bass. And actually, I just posted a bunch of these on social media just a couple days ago, because this is actually October 9th, 1982, so it was just like 2 or 3 days ago. But I'm in Portugal, so I was a day late. I posted it on the 10th, so I'm kind of fucked up. But anyway, so in the fall of '82, I'm at these shows, and I get the call from my dad that I lost my appeal and that I would have to go back to New Jersey and enter the New Jersey prison system. And so this is my prison ID, and the judge who had sentenced me to 5 years in prison had retired. And so I had an aunt who worked in the court system in Middlesex County at the time, and so they basically made arrangements for me to come back, and because I just wanted to get it over with. Like, I figured, I could run, I could, my parents would lose their house if they put up for bail, or I could wait until they forget about me, which will never happen, and then I go to jail in 5 years or 10 years. But so I just went back to New Jersey, packed up all my stuff in Olympia, Washington, and went to the courthouse with my parents, and they just took me away. My parents sat there for like 5 hours because they had no idea what was going on. Nobody told them anything. And then finally they were like, oh no, he's just like in the system. And that's when I started my jail sentence. So I was sentenced to 5 years in state prison, and was called an indeterminate 5-year sentence. And based on that sentence and my crime, which was possession of a controlled dangerous substance with intent to distribute. How many of you are holding controlled dangerous substances? And who has the intent to distribute? Everybody's right. And so based on that crime and no previous record, I was actually given a time goal of 9 months in jail. And out of that 9 months, I could work off 3 months for good behavior. And so while we were in jail, it was a super fascinating experience. I'm very, very fortunate that I actually only spent 7 months and 3 weeks in state prison. Because I had some friends who had some parents who had done some political work with the president of the New Jersey State Parole Board, and they got me out 5 weeks early so I could start my fall semester in college in Olympia, Washington, where I had gotten residency, or at least tricked them into thinking I had residency. And so anyway, I think I still have like a utility bill in my name being mailed to a P.O. box in Olympia while I was in jail. And so anyway, jail. Anybody seen Orange is the New Black? Anybody ever see that show? So like very similar experience. It really was a dark comedy. Like, I mean, people are just trying to figure out what to do. Like, one of the classic moments was that I worked in like this craft room, like you can make crafts and models. Anybody build models when they were a kid? Remember those little glass bottles of Testor's paint that were like probably oil-based and carcinogenic? Yeah. Well, we stole those from the art room, and we made a tattoo machine, and everybody was tattooing themselves with these like lead-based, oil-based inks, because all of a sudden they had colors. Like, wow, we don't just do like green tattoo prison ink, And so we took an old cassette player and broke it apart and took the little spinning cassette thing, attached a Bic pen to it, put a paper clip that we straightened out, soldered a sewing needle to it, somebody did in the metal shop, attached it to the cassette player, somebody held a newspaper rolled up with 8D batteries in it, and we had a real tattoo machine, and people, and they were all like, hey man, you want a tattoo on your back? And I was like, no, I still have no tattoos. But all these people were like so excited they had like colored, lead-based poison to put in their bodies. I'm sure every one of those guys are dead now. Like, I just can't even imagine that they're not. But so many things. I remained a vegetarian the entire time I was in jail. I taught my entire prison ward how to sprout alfalfa seeds and make alfalfa sprouts. Like, I mean, these are people like from the ghetto, like they had never seen an avocado before in their life. So I was allowed to get a 40-pound food package once a month. My parents would come and visit me and bring me this 40-pound package, and we used to smuggle alfalfa sprout seeds in because they thought they were pot seeds. And so my father found them in like not in bulk, but in a foil sealed package. And we were sprouting alfalfa sprouts in jail, and they were putting them on their gefilte fish that I was giving them that I got from the Rabbinical College of America when I made them let me have a Passover Seder because the Muslims got to do Ramadan, you know, like we did everything we could to subvert the system and fuck with the system, you know. But anyway, I did get out of jail and after 7 months and 3 weeks, and I immediately, actually got out on September 23rd, which is weird because that's my prison number, and 23 is my number. And so I got out on September 23rd, and I flew to Olympia, Washington, and then we had a big party for me. Jay gets out of jail party, so, because we all lived with bands in college. And of course, another thing that you guys probably don't know about me, besides having a mullet, is that I was a professional juggler when I was, back in Olympia, Washington in the early 80s. We traveled around and we performed at colleges and street fairs and the country fair and stuff like that. So, and then this is me back in my normal wardrobe for New Year's in 1983 at the Civic. And then in 1985, I moved to the Bay Area and to try and figure out what I was going to do with my life. You know, like I knew I wanted to do photography, but at that point, you really don't know how to create that reality. And so I just started shooting everything I could, and I was shooting a lot of dead shows. And I was shooting a lot of other music, and there's Rusty again, actually dancing to some music this time. And then this is sort of a famous series of photographs of Deadheads dancing at the Greek Theater in Berkeley in June of 1986. He is grabbing her boob, but it's his girlfriend, so it's a thing. And anyway, so these photos from the Greek Theater ended up as a spread in the Golden Road magazine of sort of like, Deadheads losing their mind kind of a story. And so at this point, like I was just starting to get published again in the Golden Road and in Relics, and trying to figure out how to make a living. And I always loved to shoot deadheads. And if you guys follow me on social media, you know that I post a lot of this kind of stuff, and it excites people, right? Like people really, because no cell phones, right? Like this was a truly unique time and space for all of us. And I met my wife. That's right there. There's Lori in the middle. Oops. Sorry, there's Lori in the middle. We met at a dead show. I think she was a little scared of me. Why is this like automatically going all of a sudden? What's going on here? People always ask me like, why were you shooting so many photographs of deadheads, right? And so the reason is pretty straightforward, right? So like, how many of you guys saw The Grateful Dead? Okay, so you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, you're all there. So you're at a dead show, and you're with all your favorite people, right? You're with your family, essentially. And you're with all these incredible people, and all this incredible music is playing. This music that, like, every single note, right, to every single song. You know every single word. You know every single song. These are the words of Robert Hunter, who obviously just passed, like, words that mean so much to all of us, right? And not only do they mean so much to all of us, they mean something different pretty much to every one of us, right? Like we all have, and you might look at, Scarlet Begonias or Flower on the Mountain or something, when you're 25, and now when you're 50, like you think of that song in a very different way than when you thought of it there, right? So there's all this incredible music, going on, and there's all this, intense energy, right? All these beautiful people, because we were all young and beautiful and hair at the time, and there's this intense, raw, sexual desire, right? I mean, everybody wanted to fuck everybody, right? I mean, face it, okay? And so you're in this moment, and we're all like transcending like this, form and content, and like in this divine symmetry that can only be explained if you were there. Like, there's never been anything like it, and there never will be again. I don't care if you go to Fish or whatever. It won't be the same. Because somebody's got a fucking phone and they're filming you in that moment, and it's just not the same. And I'm like looking at all of this stuff, and I have a camera. And, that's weird. Why is this like repeating itself now? Sorry about that. And I have this camera, and this is going on in front of me, and that's why I shot so many photographs of deadheads dancing. There's Lori again over there. She had a lot of fun back then. She still has a lot of fun. So anyway, that's the reason why I was photographing so many deadheads, and felt like, and now, 35, 40 years later, we look at these photos, and it really is this unique moment in time that I feel so honored and privileged to have actually photographed it and have these photographs so that we can look at it and remember what that moment was like for all of us. Because there's not video clips and there's not a lot of other professional photography out there like this. There are some, it's out there, but you know, I think it really helps tell the story. And so at this point I was pretty much saved by photography. I knew that that was my purpose, that's what I wanted to do, and I kept pursuing what I was doing. So I kept shooting more dead shows. Anybody ever been to like a Chinese New Year or Mardi Gras show? These are the two guys that put all those on. That's Bob Barsotti and Peter Barsotti. They're the two brothers that put all those on. Here's a Mardi Gras show, you know, Chinese New Year show, Jerry with the Dragon. And so at this point, I had sort of, jumped the barrier and was in the pit and got my first laminate, all access laminate to a dead show at the New Year shows in '86. Got to go inside the show early, get to shoot Bill warming up because he's going to fly across the room as an eagle that year, you know, getting warmed up, balloons drop, Chinese New Year. Anybody at Laguna Seca when they filmed the Touch of Grey video? All right, so you guys all remember that there was a rumor, because again, there was no cell phones, nobody was texting anybody, it wasn't on Facebook. Be at the gates at 5 p.m., we're going to film an MTV music video. And so we had heard this rumor that they were going to come and film a music video after the show. It was a daytime show, and we walked up to the gates, me, my wife, and we were just dating at the time. And all of our friends, and we said, are you guys really going to let everybody into the show? And they're going to do like some sort of, make a film? And they're like, yeah, you guys are first, come on in. And we all ran up to the front, and all my friends, Lori and all those people, they all went to the middle because they're like, we want to be in the video. And I went over to the side because it was a better angle to get shots of good old Jer turning into a skeleton. And I'm the only one that made it into the video. Like, I think it's about a 2 minute, 20-second point. I'm over the side, like I'm bobbing my head, I got the mullet, you can't miss me. You know, again, you know, 87, summer of 87, Dylan and the Dead in Oakland and Eugene, Bobby with the short shorts. On November 5th, 87, we had heard a rumor that they were going to make another MTV video, this time for Throwing Stones, and we heard it was going to be at an abandoned high school in Oakland, California. Well, I just happened to live right across the street from an abandoned high school in Oakland, California, and that's where they filmed it. So I literally just walked on set with my camera, and I just spent the next 8 or 10 hours on set pretending I belonged. Nobody fucking said a word to me, you know, and this is, you know, you guys have seen this video, right? You can go see it on YouTube if you haven't seen it. You know, they're wearing these weird hats and oil coats and like, you know, they're filming it. And I didn't know Mickey Hart at the time, and he's like, hey man, come get a picture of me next to the graffiti with the heart, because can you feel it? Because I'm Mickey Hart, can you feel it? And I'm like, hey, look, Mickey, it's got my name on it too. Can you feel it? I can feel it. If you can feel it, I can feel it, you know? And, you know, this is before I knew any of these guys, you know, and not had any, you know, and I just like walk up to Jerry. And you guys have all seen this photo a million times, right? I'm the guy that took the most bootleg photo ever of Jerry, right? So, you know, this is said everything from, you know, Happy New Year, Happy Birthday, Happy Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Immersion, like everything in the world. So a week later, so at this point, like I'm trying to make it as a photographer. A week later, on 11/11/87, I get a call from Rolling Stone magazine. They say, hey Jay, it's Jody from Rolling Stone, I have your big break. I need you to go shoot the free U2 concert in downtown San Francisco. And so, if you've seen the movie Rattle and Hum, this is in the movie. This is where Bono just happened to have a 50-foot ladder standing by to climb up this water sculpture in Justin Herman Plaza in San Francisco. That's right. And spray paint, rock and roll stops the traffic. Because it did. The Embarcadero Freeway was right behind him. And so, I was published in Rolling Stone magazine, and this was my first assignment for the magazine, and I've gone on to do 300 assignments for them over the years. This last week, of course, was the second anniversary of Tom Petty dying. When Tom died 2 years ago, Rolling Stone magazine put out a special tribute issue, and they used my photo of Tom on the cover. And so it was almost exactly 30 years after my first assignment for the magazine that I got my first cover of Rolling Stone. So, and so, you know, lots more Grateful Dead, New Year's Eve, We Will Survive, another assignment for Rolling Stone magazine with Jerry and Carlos, the little midget boy. I still can't figure out why Carlos looks so small next to Jerry. And then, you know, I saw Bill Graham walk into a dressing room. I followed him in, and Bob and Jerry were in there with their Hawaiian shirts because they just got back from a scuba diving trip in Hawaii. I said, how about a photo? Jerry kissed Bill. More Frost shows in '88. Free concert at the band show in Golden Gate Park with John Cipollina. That's Steve Kimmock. The only the only heir apparent Jerry guy out of all of them that actually ever played with Jerry. And this is actually in my new book. You guys all know I have a new book out on Jerry Garcia. So some of these shots you can see in that book. It just came out yesterday. Go to your favorite bookseller and support the arts. Yeah. Jerry Garcia's Secret Space of Dreams. Bobby in his old Click model shirt. You know, there was just so much stuff. This shot here I think is also in my new book, and I sent the book to be printed in Hong Kong, and we found a problem with the book, and we had to postpone the printing for 2 days. And in the meantime, I'm working on a book for Pete Shapiro on the Capitol Theater, and Pete gave me Elvis Costello's email because I was asking him to give me a quote for that book, and I'm emailing Elvis, who's in Paris on vacation. And he's like, yeah, when I get back, I'll write you a quote for the book, no problem, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, as a matter of fact, I've been looking for your email because I need a photo from you that you took of me and T-Bone Burnett. And then I was like, all of a sudden, I'm like, holy shit, my book's not getting printed. I have a problem with it. And I emailed Elvis, I go, emergency. I said, I'm using this photo in this new book. And he knows this photo because he's seen it. That's how me and Elvis know each other, from this photo. And I go, will you give me a quote about this photo for the book? And he gave it to me at like 4 in the morning in Paris on his vacation, and I got it in like the day before the book printed. And it's a great quote about Rodgers and Hammerstein and seeing the Grateful Dead in '72 on Europe '72, and like, you have to read the quote. It's great. It's just fucking great. He was toiling in the winter of '72. Wow. Anyway, this is in concert against AIDS, the first big AIDS benefit. That's John Fogerty did a whole set of Creedence Clearwater songs. This is Bill Graham. That's Randy Jackson from American Idol. Steve Jordan. So in 1990, I started doing a bunch of work for Rob Wasserman. He was recording a record called Trios, and he had hired me to do all this stuff. And so at that point, Weir decided he wanted to do a new project outside the Grateful Dead called Weir Wasserman. Rob's manager referred me to Bob's people, and they hired me. This is in 1990, and this is the first time that ever a band member in the Grateful Dead paid me money to photograph them. And so I did all these publicity shots of Bob. And then, Bob liked what I did, and then Bob did a children's book with his sister. And so I did the author photo for that book. He did a second children's book. I did the author photo for that. They decided to add Jay Lane on drums and start becoming Rat Dog, so I shot that. I did a story for a biking magazine with Bob. Rob Wasserman and Clarence Clemens, Garth Hudson from the band, another Mardi Gras. And at this point now, I could just call Bob Weir's office and say, hey, I'm gonna come to these shows, and they would just put me on the guest list, and I had passes. So I kind of really truly crossed the barrier, and I became one of them. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Anyway, so in January 1991, I got a call from Blair Jackson, who did the Golden Road magazine. He said, hey, I'm doing an interview with Garcia and Hunter. Do you want to come do the photos? And I'm like, well, fuck yeah. So I had never been face to face with Garcia. I'd done a portrait of him. And so I went to the Grateful Dead office, and I had 3 or 4 different cameras and medium format and color film and black and white film. And I sat down and I took 3 or 4 photos, and they came in and said, you're done. I'm like, what? And I really quickly just blasted through a roll and a half of black and white, a half a roll of color, and the whole shoot was done in 3 minutes. Of course, it's where I got some of those iconic shots of Hunter and Garcia, which I didn't realize this, but this is the only interview they've ever done together, and there's not a lot of photos. I think Herbie Green has some photos of Hunter and Garcia together, but besides that and these are I think the only photos of Hunter and Garcia together. And of course, when we lost Hunter a 2 weeks ago, whenever that was, these photos, obviously were everywhere, shared by the band, etc. But even though that shoot was just 3 minutes long, this is the cover of my new book, except it's a black and white photo. This is hand colored that somebody did for a magazine cover. I still got, what is perhaps my most iconic photo of Jerry in that 3-minute photo shoot that I did with these guys. We lost Bill Graham just shortly after the end of 1991. There was a big free concert with Neil Young. They did Forever Young with the Grateful Dead. More portraits of Bob. This was a Rolling Stone magazine assignment with Garcia for an art show that he was doing. But while this was all going on, I was shooting all this other stuff because nobody really gave a shit about the Grateful Dead in the mainstream media, and I couldn't make a living just shooting the Grateful Dead. In terms of the way people approach it today, buying prints or books, nobody really cared, right? There was a story here, a story there. So I was shooting all sorts of stuff. This was a magazine cover of the Red Hot Chili Peppers in '89, and this was Lollapalooza in '92 for Rolling Stone, and this is Nirvana in a record store in 1990. The Flaming Lips in 1989, right after the Loma Prieta earthquake. the Butthole Surfers, you know, the band X up in Seattle in '86. I mean, can you imagine who this guy landed on? I mean, look at how high the stage is. The stage is 6 feet high. Like, this guy really hurts the people. This is Chris Cornell from Soundgarden stage diving in a nightclub. This is a shot of all of Soundgarden and all of Pearl Jam backstage at Lollapalooza in '92. Eddie Vedder in '92. I shot Alanis Morissette's first magazine cover right before Jagged Little Pill came out. You know, she had sold 10 records like that week, and this was her first magazine cover. Jane's Addiction back in '91. Van Halen down in Mexico at Cabo Wabo when Sammy Hagar opened the club up for Rolling Stone magazine. Primus in 1989. I went on to do a ton of stuff with Primus. This was my first magazine cover with them for BAM magazine in 1990. Les was steering his boat, and I kept saying, "Come closer to the dock." And he hit the dock of his boat and scraped off his paint. He blames me to this day, and I'm like, "It was your bad boat driving, Les." Like, you can see they're like, "You're close, you're close." But I did all this work with Primus, and you know, these guys are pretty comfortable around me. Magazine covers, record company shoots. And so I decided that no risk, no reward, right? Lollapalooza stage diver. That I was going to publish my second coffee table book. I had done my Grateful Dead book at this point, and I did a book on Primus, and I started my own publishing company. This was the second book that I self-published. And still to this day, I do a lot of work with Primus still, Willy Wonka. And so back in '95, I had gotten an assignment to shoot Dr. Dre for the cover of The Source magazine. Do you guys know what The Source is? It's like the hip hop Bible, right? It's like the magazine for the hip hop community. And somewhere along the way, some art director decided me, Jay Blakesberg, white suburban Jewish boy, should be like the next cool hip hop photographer. And so I was shooting like Snoop and Dre and like E40 and all these cool cats. Like, I knew nothing about that music, and I still know nothing about it. And so anyway, so I fly down to LA to shoot Dr. Dre. And I go down there, and I'm there in this photo studio all day long, and Dre never comes. And I finally get a phone call from the publicist saying, Dre was in the recording studio all last night. He can't come to the shoot. Can you do it tomorrow? I'm like, sure, but I gotta fly back to San Francisco because I gotta shoot Primus. Right, so I fly back up to San Francisco, and thank God that I did, because Primus had the greatest nitrous party backstage. Right, like everybody once in their life should have like an opportunity. That's Les, the other one was Lair, the guitar player, like to shoot like one good nitrous party backstage with a band. You know, like it just reminds me of that. You know that shot that Andy Leibovitz took of the Garcia band with Merle Saunders live at the Keystone backstage, where they're all sitting around with the tank of nitrous. But you know, just like a classic moment. So I flew back down to LA the next day to shoot Dre. And you guys remember who Suge Knight was? He was the guy that was like the gangster record mogul who had Death Row Records. The logo for Death Row Records was the electric chair. So the story for The Source was how Dr. Dre was leaving Death Row Records. So we got the electric chair prop from a Hollywood prop house, and we shot him like leaving it. And so when Dre got there, he comes in, and we've got like 6 8-foot tables full of wardrobe for him to check out. We have a wardrobe stylist, the whole thing, right? And he looks at all this clothes, and he comes in with this entourage of like 15 people, right? Like 3 or 4 SUVs, the limousine, right? And he comes in the limo, and he goes, I don't like any of these clothes, we're going to Melrose. He was already like 4 hours late. Well, he was a day late, plus 4 hours. So they get in their entourage, and they leave, and they go to Melrose to go shopping. And they come back from Melrose, and he's wearing a pair of black sweatpants and a black t-shirt, which we had like 9 versions of, right? So Dr. Dre comes in, he goes, you need to lock the studio door because Suge Knight has a hit out on me, and nobody's allowed into the studio. So he's got 15 guys behind him, and they all have fucking Uzis, right? And I'm like I didn't fucking sign up for this shit. I'm just a fucking hippie deadhead. Okay, like I don't fuck with Uzis. Like, we're not going to the immersion with our Uzis, you know? And so at the end of the shoot, I said, can I do some shots here with the limo? And he said, yeah. And you can see, like, there's one of his guys, right? It's like out on the stand on top of the limo. But if you look at this shot, you can see there's like 4 guys back there. There's like another 8 guys behind me, like in a semicircle, all with fucking hands on their semi-automatic weapons. Like, you know, fucking heavy shit. Like, you know, not our world. The Flaming Lips are another band that I've been working with for 30 years. This is in 1989. This is Les Claypool and Sean Lennon for their new record, Claypool Lennon Delirium, which I shot the new record for. So still working with Les, still 30 years later. And that's one of the things that I love. Like, it's not just the Grateful Dead that I've been photographing for decades. You know, Michael Franti I've been shooting for over 30 years, Primus. This is the inside of the record. So Les said to me, he said, I need you to find a location that looks like I could be on the moon, because we want to do an outer space theme for the record, because that's what the illustration was that their artist did. So that's where this is where I, you know, that's what they ended up doing, and it worked, right? Of course, it was the cover of Relics. Ralph Stanley from Hardly Strictly Bluegrass. Tom Jones, it's not unusual. Michael Franti, again, these are shot for his last record. The group shot from this photo shoot. This was in Mexico, playing in the sand, is on the back cover of their new record. Jackie Green, who I've been shooting for over 15 years now. Snoop Dogg for The Source again. Snoop pulled into the photo studio with his Escalade. We open up the garage door. He pulls in, pulls out, opens the door. The whole thing just smoke coming out. It was like Cheech and Chong, I swear to God. Right, so he's like smoking weed during the shoot. I like turn around to load some film in a camera. I go back and he's like passed out. I'm shaking his shoulder. I'm like, Snoop, wake up. And he's like, yeah, man. I'm known for passing out at my photo shoots. John Lee Hooker, David Byrne, you know, whenever he goes to a city to do a tour, he has a bicycle and he tours. He pulls up to my photo studio for the shoot, rings the doorbell. He's got his bike helmet on. My assistant answers the door and hands him a package. We thought he was a bike messenger. And David says, no, my name's David. I'm here for a photo shoot. Love shooting David Byrne. Spinal Tap, Tom Waits, which has got a great story, but I don't have time to tell it. Carlos, Joni Mitchell, Radiohead in 1993, Neil Young. This is the cover of the last Taj Mahal Kedmo record, just shot 3 years ago, something like that. Van Morrison, Twiddle, who I've been working with a bunch, Pigeons playing ping pong. So oddly enough, I'm still relevant and people still want me to take their picture. The lovely Elliot Pratt. And this, of course, is from her album, her album that she put out last year. You know, these are some of the magazine covers that I shot. I'll go through them quickly. There's the Primus shoot, the Chili Peppers, Iggy Pop, Tom Waits, Todd Rundgren. That guitar, that's the guitar that's in the Met Museum in the exhibit. That's Clapton's SG, the $2 million guitar. Wow. Todd Rundgren bought it from somebody like really cheap in a very sketchy way and used to play it. And I got hired to photograph that guitar, right? Wow. And he just came to this photo studio. He didn't know me, but we had a mutual friend. And based on that mutual friend's word, it was Paul Kantner from the Airplane's ex-wife. She's a publicist. And she said, oh yeah, Jay's cool, you can drop it off. He came by this photo studio that I was just borrowing from a friend, hands me this $2 million guitar to photograph, and then just leaves and says, I'll be back in 5 hours. And then we did these great shots of that guitar. It's just like crazy shit. Alanis Morissette, that was that first magazine cover. Tori Amos, her first magazine cover. You know, lots of Relic stuff. Still been working with them a bunch. Neil Young, there's the Dr. Dre Source cover. Bobby, just 2 years ago. Emmylou and Rodney Crowell. Zigaboo, Neil Young. You guys want to know what the Brit School benefit is? So I shot this at the Brit School benefit. It shows up in Rolling Stone magazine. And you know, Eddie Vedder does the Brit School every year. So the next year, Eddie Vedder's back, and I walk up to Eddie Vedder. 7-minute warning, they're telling me. Wow. What? That's some fucked up shit.
Resist!
Wait, no, I started late, Matt. Oh, it's 6:21. I guess I'm really going slow here. All right, so anyway, so Eddie Vedder, the next year I say to Eddie Vedder, I go, hey man, I'm the guy that did that shot of you that was in Rolling Stone. He goes, oh my God, let me tell you a story about that. He goes, you know that scarf that I'm wearing in that photograph? He goes, you know Bradley Cooper, right? I'm like, well, I don't know Bradley Cooper, but yeah, the actor. He goes, well, Bradley Cooper asked me if I would sign some posters and memorabilia for him so that he could auction it off at a charity thing. And as a gift, he gave me that scarf. And he goes, so Bradley Cooper saw the photo in Rolling Stone magazine and called me up and said, Eddie, I saw that great picture of you and Neil in Rolling Stone, and you're wearing the scarf that I gave you. He goes, I love that scarf. Can I have it back? And Eddie Vedder goes, fuck no, dude. Anyway, so, all right, I'm going to skip forward here. Lots more Grateful Dead, Jerry Garcia, David Grisman. If you go online, there's all the great stories. I tell the story in a couple magazine articles recently. This is the shoot where I told Jerry Garcia to stop singing when I was having a private concert because I want his mouth moving. Jerry getting old and drugged out, and then this is the last time I photographed Jerry making a video for the movie Smoke with Ashley Judd. My last one-on-one face-to-face with Garcia, this is April '95. Shoreline, Jerry died, very sad, we were all sad, we're still sad. Tragic, tragic, tragic. Sorry, I'm just going fast. We have the memorial, that's Olatunji, my brother-in-law. Playing drums with Olatunji. There's Phil. That's Graham Lesh right down front there with the drum. Young Graham Lesh. And so, post Grateful Dead, there was all this stuff to photograph, Mickey and Bobby and Phil, and they're going to do the other ones, and with Trey and Paige and Phil and Friends with Kreutzmann and David Nelson and Owsley in color, because nobody's ever done a portrait but me of Owsley because he hates photographs. Phil on the trampoline with Fish. He was like so terrified, he wasn't even plugged in, right? Trey and Phil, then Bob had to play with Fish because Phil did the cue. We're gonna get back together and we're gonna do the other ones, and then I'm gonna do a book on the Grateful Dead in 2002. And Matt, are you here? I'm gonna do my one last story about Fare Thee Well and we'll call it a day. Dylan and the Dead in 2003. This is the author photo for Phil's biography that I did. Phil on Mardi Gras. Phil in his nudie suit. The only band member. That's me with short hair. 2009 tour with Warren. Cover of Drum Magazine. Phil's 70th birthday. Further. It's the fastest slideshow ever. Bobby. Further at Sweetwater. Lock-in with Trey. Phil. Jackie and Luther and Phil. All right, Fare Thee Well. Who went to Fare Thee Well? Yeah. All right, greatest family reunion ever, right? So Pete Shapiro calls me up in December of 2014, is that right? 2015 is when it was. He says, guess what? I got the band back together. And guess who's going to play guitar? Trey Anastasio, and you can't tell anybody. I told my wife. She's good at keeping secrets. So then he goes, you got to go up to Marin and photograph some of the envelopes from the ticket sale. So I go up to Marin. They've got $45 million in postal money orders in this house in Stinson Beach that has no lock on the front door. Okay, that's the fucking Grateful Dead way. Right, so that became one of the tickets. Trey came out and rehearsed with Bobby up at the beach in Marin. Right before the shows, I did the portraits of the band. We get to Santa Clara. It was incredible, right? Everybody remember how incredible Santa Clara was? Like, we all just were like, oh my God, like, we're with all of our people again. And a lot of people, like, disappeared for a lot of years. They raised families. They had careers. They, like, put kids through college. And then all of a sudden, we're all empty nesters and we're at Fare Thee Well. Like, we're having the time of our lives. And I take this photo of Mickey, right? And this photo comes back later on in the story. But this was, like, the first photo. Like, I posted this on social media and had like 1 million Facebook views like in like a day. Like, I mean, the internet was blowing up over Fare Thee Well. And then I posted this photo, and then we realized it had the set list on. It was before the show. And Lori was the one who noticed it, and we pulled it down, and the internet fucking exploded, right? Because, I mean, like, if people could have figured out what they played because it was low res, nobody could read it, like, I would have been the biggest fucking asshole on the planet. But thank God, nobody could read it. By the time we got to Chicago, right, I wasn't holding the camera up over my head anymore, I was on a fucking stepladder, right? Like, I'm like, this is Fare Thee Well. Like, the lawyer for the Grateful Dead sent me an email that says, I think you're an insurance liability to be on the drum rise with Mickey during the show. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen. I will keep shooting that shot. And anyway, this is the shot that I was going for. Like, Trey, Phil, Bob in a complete fucking overdrive. And look at Bob's face. Like, right? So anyway, so we get to Chicago. And they take this photograph and they make a big giant vinyl sticker of it and put it on the door next to my office. And this guy named Corn Capshaw, who manages Fish and Dave Matthews and every great band out there today, says to me, you need to get this shot with the band on stage facing you with all the people behind it. And I'm like, yes, can you help me make it happen? He's like, oh no, you're on your own. So I'm like, I know there's no way that the band would be, I could go to the band and be like, hey, I have this great idea. I think you should come out on the last night before the show and pose for me so I can get a picture of you with 70,000 people. Like, they would all be just like, fuck you, Blakesberg, go away. So I make up this story and I go to all the managers because everybody's got a manager. And I'm like, hey, I have this idea. Last night, band comes out, and they thank the audience. It's not a bow, because they're going to do that at the end. They thank the audience, right? Mickey can pump his fist, and Phil can say, I'm not worthy, and blah, blah, blah. So they all agree, all the managers agree, I get all the band members to agree, or at least the drummers, and then I go to Phil, because I hadn't gotten his attention yet, and I go, Phil, we're gonna do this thing. He's like, right, what are we doing? I'm like, you're gonna come out on stage, you're gonna look at the audience, you're gonna turn around, there's 10,000 people behind me, I'll be up there. He looks at me and goes, is Weir doing it? I go, oh yeah, Bob's in. I need to talk to Bob yet. Mom said I could do it. Dad said I could do it. So I go to the other side of the stage and I see Bob and I'm like, Bob. He's like, Jay, leave me alone. I'm going on stage. I'm like, no, we're doing this thing. He's like, oh, right, Matt mentioned something. What are we doing? I'm like, you're going to go out, Phil, blah, turn around. He goes, okay. I go up, I jump on the drum riser, I give the thumbs up to the lighting person. They put the lights on, they light everything up. Phil's the first one out. He waves everybody out and they come out and the place goes nuts. You guys remember this? Like the place is fucking, like I'm on the step ladder, like it's like the Memorex commercial where I'm like being blown backwards. My hair is like standing up. I've got 2 cameras, like if you fuck this photo up, like you can't fuck this photo up, right? And they come out and they turn around and there's 70,000 cell phones and it's like the most incredible moment. But for me, the moment for why this is such an incredible photograph for me is because if you remember at the beginning of my presentation, I was that 15-year-old kid with a bong on my chest at Englishtown, and this is the spark that I talked about. This is the magic. Like I followed that spark, I tried to touch that magic, I fucking worked my ass off, and 40-something years later, I was the guy that the band hired to be their photographer for the 50th anniversary of their band. Thank you. That's the story. That's the story, is that art from like, Englishtown 77 to right here in 2015 in Chicago. Wow. And then of course the band is all freaked out, so they do their little huddle on stage. And then this is the shot that I really wanted to get the whole time, but the only way to do it was like a 6-foot ladder right behind Trey and Phil. So I jump up on it during Addicts of My Life, last song of the show, and everybody starts cheering. They're like, woo! And I'm like, what's going on? I look up on the video screens. Guido, I'm gonna finish this right after this little Fairly Well thing so your band can play. So like 3 or 4 minutes, okay? 2. Guido says I have 2 minutes. So I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? I turn around, I look at the video screen and like they're showing all my portraits and I'm like, oh my God, these are my photos. I know that everybody's cheering at. You guys remember this? Everybody's like, every time a new portrait came up, it's like, oh my God, right? I'm looking at these pictures of mine and I'm crying on stage because they're my photos. And they get to Phil and Trey and Bob, and then the last photo of the band and the fucking place erupts, right? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm like crying. And then of course, the show ends, right? And I get the final bow. And unfortunately, I don't have time to tell this story, but basically, I can't tell the Bill Murray story. I'll tell it next year in Prague. But it involved alcohol and violence. And of course, Fairly Well is my book, and that's the cover of it. And then, of course, it goes on to Dead & Co. For my last thing, I shot this the day that O'Teal auditioned, and they said, just put O'Teal on the end in case he doesn't make the cut. Thanks for listening, everybody. Love you. Appreciate it. Go out and enjoy some music. Rock and roll, baby. See you all in Prague. Thank you. Appreciate it. What's your name? Greg. I know I met you before. Thank you. Thanks, Stacey. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for listening. No. Okay. You're welcome. Okay. Where? I want to be on Terry Gross so bad. But I'll do your brother. More work. Yeah. I was